Good evening, everyone. Welcome to another edition of Five Strikes Tonight. My name is Sydney Hunt. So glad you could join me tonight, whether you're joining me on Facebook, YouTube, or on Twitter. Thank you so much for coming on board. Friday, October 15th, 2021, right in the middle of fall and coming out the end of an international break, an international break for I would say the U.S. men's national team, but all of FIFA pretty much, as Atlanta United have been off for these past few weeks. United States men's national team winning 2 games over the international break and dropping 1. Still in good shape as far as the World Cup standings are concerned, World Cup qualifying standings are concerned, and CONCACAF in second place at last check behind Mexico. Obviously, wanted that win in Panama. Not a good performance in Panama, but United States bounced back from it with a victory over Costa Rica. Very promising moving forward. And of course, next up is Mexico in Cincinnati. We are going to, though, talk about Atlanta United as they get back to it tomorrow night in Toronto, above the border, against Toronto FC, who would have been candidates for sure. Playoffs well out of the picture for them, but not so for Atlanta United, and we'll get to that in just a little bit. Atlanta United, of course, with 6 matches remaining, 1 point behind CF Montreal for playoff places, and we'll dive into that and much more with my guest. Requires no introduction, Joe Patrick. Joe, good evening.
Sydney, thank you for having me on. It's an honor to be on your show. You're doing a great job with this show. I enjoy it, so thanks for having me on. Great to talk to you.
Appreciate it. Before we get to Atlanta United, let's talk about the U.S. men's national team. How much? I know you've been a busy man over these past few weeks, but how much have you been able to watch with the U.S. and how are you feeling with them for the rest of this qualifying cycle?
Yeah, so for anybody who doesn't know, I also cover the Atlanta Braves. It's a decently important part of the season for the Braves.
Yeah. Little important.
Making a run in the playoffs. But so I've been taking a little bit of a break along with Atlanta United during this time, but I've been keeping kind of up with, what's going on with the U.S. team because I'm always interested in that kind of thing. So,
sure.
This is qualifying. It's never easy. The results don't always go the way you expect them to go or the way you think they should go, the way you plan them to go before the game starts, and I think that Panama game was obviously evidence of that. But I think you have to consider it mainly a successful international break for the United States. I mean, ideally you want to get that draw on the road and, just draw on the road, win at home, you're pretty much set. But yep. I still think it was a pretty decent break for them. And I thought that it was good for, Atlanta United's players to get out of there relatively clean, just kind of, that's the main thing that I'm always focused on from Atlanta United perspective is just get out of that healthy.
Right.
And you didn't really overburden Miles Robinson with minutes, only playing 2 games in this break. And I think Gonzalo Pineda said that he would be available for the game tomorrow. So I think all good news on that front.
Yeah, kind of tagging off that George Bello only starting the Panama match, so you would assume that George is available for the United States, or not for the United States, for Atlanta United against Toronto. But as I said, 6 matches remaining, and I want to take a look at the standings because let me get this right here. There we go.
Oh, nice.
I want to take a look at the standings because you can see, obviously, New England's running with the East. They've pretty much already clinched the East if they haven't already. Nashville, their best chance is at second place. So you see these 4 teams here, Nashville, Philly, Orlando. But then, even though Atlanta United are at 39 points, you look at Montreal, 40 points. NYCFC, who Atlanta United will play on Wednesday, 40 points. DC United, 40 points. Orlando, 42 points. Atlanta United, with a win, can be in 4th place if they beat Toronto. I mean, it's just amazing to see with 6 matches remaining, just razor thin margins here of the standings, right?
Oh, yeah, totally. I mean, I would say that the standings are actually better than they even look for Atlanta. I mean, actually, they look pretty bad for Atlanta United, considering they're currently in 8th place, which is obviously below the playoff line. But,
sure.
Atlanta United for the rest of the season, they're hardly playing any teams that are above them. They're playing NYCFC, and that is it, I think, for the rest of the season of teams above them. And NYCFC has not been looking good here as of late anyway. So, things are looking good for Atlanta United. And again, you said it right there. If they win this weekend tomorrow against Toronto, a team they should beat, although we'll obviously be talking about that a little bit more because the road has not, been as, as you would expect for Atlanta United here recently. But still, I mean, I think things are looking really bright for the team, despite the fact that you have some things going against you. We're going to talk about Joseph Martinez as well, but yeah, I mean, I think you have to be really, really optimistic if you're Atlanta United for sole reason because of the schedule that this team has coming up. I mean, they play NYCFC, they play Red Bulls, who are right below them, and then they've got two more against Toronto, one more against Cincinnati, another against Inter Miami, who they just beat, who's also down there. So things are really looking up for Atlanta.
Yeah, I want to talk about that because it's so easy to get caught up in New York's out of playoffs, Miami's out of playoffs, Toronto's out of playoffs, Cincy is very much out of playoffs. But
yeah,
I mean, I know what the players will say. They're taking each match one at a time. Each match is a final. They'll say some derivative of that. If we were to ask them, okay, 6 matches to go, 5 of those teams are outside the playoff picture looking in. But how hard is it to maintain that focus, even considering that the team, should beat, a good majority of these clubs?
Right. Well, I mean, that's the joke about MLS, right? Is that, you never gamble on it because even though you could have the first place team playing the last place team, you never really know in this league. The league is kind of structured that way, right? It's kind of structured in the American style where you have the salary caps and that creates some level of parity between the clubs. So there's always going to be that interesting dynamic between teams when they play. But I think that when it comes to Atlanta, we've seen kind of some incremental progression from them, even though they've lost some games here. I still feel like they're firmly on an upward trajectory, and something that Darren Eales, the club president, has talked about so often, unfortunately, when they've had to let go of managers, is talking about the direction of travel of the team, right? And he talked about the direction of travel is not on the right path under Frank de Boer. I think he probably said something similar about Gabriel Heinze potentially. I'm not. Don't quote me on that, but it really does feel like Atlanta United right now is on the appropriate direction of travel, the direction that everyone at the club, from the front office to the fans, really want to see. So I think that is a positive sign, and I think that they can kind of cement that over these next 6 games by getting themselves into the playoffs. And I would actually say not even just into the playoffs. I really think that this team can actually get themselves a home playoff game, which I think would be really important for the optics of the club in this city where there's been a lot of sporting success with a lot of teams, the Braves, Georgia, there's a lot of success happening here. The Hawks are another big one. I think it's important for that reason for Atlanta to get themselves that one home playoff game if they can manage it, because it will create a lot of excitement and kind of propel the club, going into next year for sure, no matter what happens as a result of this year's playoffs.
Yeah, and again, looking at the standings, Orlando's 42 points, Atlanta at 39. So if Atlanta win and Orlando lose, they'll be live on points. Depending on, as we said, again, what happens with DC, New York, Montreal, Atlanta United would be in that 4th spot on goal differential. They'll be level on wins, level on points. But assuming we would have that edge on goal differential. So again, as we mentioned, those margins are razor thin, and it's just incredible to see so much shifting, especially among these last few weeks. So let's talk about Toronto. As I said, well, off the playoff hunt, they're not officially eliminated, but they're all out of the hunt right now. They're really shipping goals at an alarming rate. 54 goals allowed, which is tied for Cincinnati for the most allowed in MLS. So you'd say Atlanta United would be out for goals tomorrow, but there's just one little problem. That main source of goals is missing. So, and we got this question on Twitter, and I'm assuming he's not the only one that has this question, but it's the big one. Who does Atlanta United turn to tomorrow at striker?
It's a great question. I would be a little bit surprised if Gonzalo Pineda turns to the option that he's turned to in the past, which has been what he terms as like dual false nines with Ezequiel Barco and Luis Araujo up top.
Right.
first of all, I would just kind of be picky about that language. They kind of play more just like strikers, but I wouldn't necessarily refer to them as false nines specifically. But what I'm really trying to say is that I would be surprised if he goes back to that tactic that he's been using, because I thought that when he used it against Philadelphia, they kind of knew that was coming. They knew that Joseph was not going to play in that game. Most likely, he had missed training all week. I think that was the week where they had said that he was having an exam or an MRI on his knee, and he had missed training. So I think that they could expect that was going to be coming, and they were able to pretty much shut Atlanta United down at that point. I think because they kind of were able to prepare, because Atlanta had used that tactic against a team that they had played just prior. I can't remember who it was, but so I would be surprised for that reason that they would just go right back to that, because I think that Gonzalo Pineda might realize that these teams would be prepared for what Atlanta United might throw at them. The problem is that, what other options do you have, right? Hugo Torres is one where, he's kind of known now as being the backup striker. Of course, it's kind of a shame, because the backup striker should have been Lisandro Lopez, right? The guy who was brought in from Racing Club, who's had a great career in Europe and all that. But of course, he was let go by his own. He asked to leave because he had a family bereavement. So I think Cubo Torres is potentially a guy they could go to. I think they could change. They could use the same personnel that they've been using without Joseph, where you have that front three essentially of Barco, Araujo, and Moreno, but maybe use them in different roles so that they're doing things that Toronto may not be expecting as much. But I think overall, I think that if you do want to go with Cubo Torres, I think that would probably work because of what you said about Toronto, and that they've been shipping goals so often. You have enough quality in the attack in general. If you get a guy like Cubo Torres to go in there and at least just occupy the center back or two, and let guys like Ezequiel Barco and Araujo kind of just create, the attack kind of on their own essentially, and let Cubo kind of be the guy who's cleaning up things and just kind of making the aggressive runs and being a physical presence up there, I think that would work for you. I think the real thing for Atlanta United is going to be just if they can keep a clean sheet. If they can go on the road and keep a clean sheet, I have to feel like this team is going to score at least one goal to get them to 3 points.
Yeah, and the thing about Cuba is, he's not endeared himself to fans, and Atlanta United Twitter will probably explode if Cuba gets to start tomorrow for various reasons. He's kind of become the scapegoat in the face of exactly, sure. Exactly. But I want to ask you too, what does maybe a player like a Jackson Conway play into something like this?
Well, I for one would love to see Jackson Conway. I'm a big Jackson Conway fan. I would throw out another name similar to Conway, but different style of player, is Tyler Wolff. Tyler Wolff could be a guy who comes in. What Tyler Wolff offers you...
he's actually out. He's actually out with the toe injury.
Okay. Well, then I don't need to talk about it. I was going to say, he's a good presser. He's a presser of the ball. He could play in that style. But I like Jackson Conway as well. I mean, I've been a huge fan of his. He's a better technical player than Cubo Torres. Just he can strike the ball cleaner. Just when he gets on the ball, the touches are better, and I think that he kind of creates more danger. The flip side is that he just doesn't kind of have the experience. Sometimes he runs himself out of position. Because not necessarily because he's not working hard. Sometimes it's overworking, especially with a young player. They kind of want to do everything. They feel a pressure to have to perform and impress the manager, and sometimes that can lead them to not play great tactically. And so I think that Cubo Torres would be a better tactical player. He would be able to carry out Gonzalo Pineda's instructions probably a little bit better. But I always am a fan of I think the more talented player in Jackson Conway, the player who can do more things on the ball and would just generally present a greater goal threat for you. And I would still, I would be pretty surprised if he doesn't play in this game at all. I think that, even if he doesn't start, I think that Jackson Conway is a guy you would want to bring in as a sub at some point, just to kind of give you a physical presence, whether that's at the end of the game, trying to either score a goal or even defending set pieces and things like that. I think that there's so much that Jackson Conway offers physically and technically. He can be a real asset for you.
Right. And going back to Joseph, what's your granted, he missed the international break with Venezuela because of this knee situation, and is going to miss tomorrow against Toronto. So, do you feel like this is just a precaution by Gonzalo Pineda, just saying, "Hey, we don't want to overwork Joseph. We understand his importance to the club, but we don't want to overwork him, especially coming off this injury, where you can, I want to say, risk not having him in the lineup against Toronto, given the fact that, as we said, they've shipped goals. But at the same time, what's your level of concern with Joseph that, maybe this is a little bit more serious than Pineda and the club are kind of letting on at this point?
Well, I think that, the situation with Joseph is really interesting, and not the ideally what you want to be talking about if you're an Atlanta United fan, but it's a reality. It's a reality of the situation, and I think Atlanta United fans need to kind of come to grips with the fact that Joseph Martinez is a different player now than he was when the team won MLS Cup in 2018 and 2017, of course, obviously. He's no longer the kind of, or at least he hasn't shown himself to be yet this year, the kind of guy who is going to make those aggressive runs through the middle of the field to the back post, trying to get on the ends of crosses. And I think there's a couple reasons for that. One is obviously what has happened to him physically over the last couple years. Not only the knee injury and everything that happened, but just getting older. When you get older, it's harder to be the kind of explosive, athletic kind of striker that he was when he, it's kind of crazy. I think he was still a young DP. He was still labeled as a young DP during that first year when they brought him in on loan, by the way, from Torino before they made that one official, like after 2 games or whatever it was. But, so he's a different player than he was. But I think that that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just that the team and the front office, as they kind of develop the personnel around him going forward, they just need to understand that. They need to understand that they need to put different kinds of players around him maybe than they would have when he was a different kind of player who was making those runs. Now he's not going to be kind of getting on the ends of crosses like he used to be. We've already seen it this year. He's going to drop in more into like midfield, drop a little deeper to get touches. And he attracts players when he does that. And, the players' opponents will follow him and stay on him. And he's really good. He's got really great technical skill, and he can take a touch and find a player who's entering the vacated space where he was. So it's not necessarily a bad thing, but you just have to have the tactics and the personnel around him that can make that effective. So, I think that all of this is something that everybody kind of in the Atlanta United ecosystem needs to come to grips with to an extent. And I think that we are, but as it comes to, as it relates to the injury that you asked about, Sydney, I don't know if it's impossible to tell what his actual health status is right now. But I don't mind him getting an extended period of rest at this point in the season, especially when what we were talking about earlier with the schedule that Atlanta United is facing here, which is the easiest in MLS. Like nobody has it easier over these next 6 games than Atlanta United, at least in terms of just what their opponents say on paper. So I don't mind him getting rest. I think it's somewhat of a gamble, but it's a gamble that could pay off in your favor if you do go ahead and make the playoffs, or even as we talked about earlier, potentially hosting a playoff game, and then you get Joseph back at in a better condition than you otherwise would.
Yeah. And, talking about his age, kind of hard to believe he's 28.
I know.
So when he started in the league, his birthday was on May 19th, so he's turned 28. No, more like 28 and a half right now. But when he started in the league, he was pretty much only 23. But it's kind of hard to believe that, or 24. But it's hard to believe that, he is, I mean, time is time, but he is a lot older than he was when he came into the league. So what do you know about the human body, especially with the amount of gameplay that Joseph has had, the amount of running and all of that? The human body naturally breaks down. So I think that, you hear in the NFL, Tom Brady, time versus time. I think to some extent, not so much now, but to some extent soon, it'll be, Joseph versus time. How much longer does he have before his his production tails off. And, it might be a little premature to think about it right now, but at the same time, especially with this ACL, we have to start keeping that in our minds along with Atlanta United fans. So, yeah, we talked about the schedule, just being this really, I don't want to say cakewalk, but not a difficult schedule by any stretch of the imagination for Atlanta United. If they do make the playoffs, which is a very real possibility, especially if they get that whole match, how far would you see them getting in there?
I think that this team could make a real run. Of course, you never quite know because other teams will have to play. And how often do we see in MLS the top teams get knocked out by somebody? Because that's the nature of playoffs, right? And again, we talked earlier about kind of the way that MLS is structured, that creates a certain level of parity and a certain level of unpredictable. What do you call it? Like, it's just unpredictable week to week. And then the playoffs are like the epitome of that, where we saw an LAFC team a couple of years ago that was looking like one of the most dominant teams that this league had seen for in years, get knocked out in the first or second round of the playoffs, I think by the Timbers. So you see that quite often. So if you're looking at the standings and you're thinking, and you're looking at the point tally that New England has racked up this year, and you're thinking, well, there's no way any team is going to be getting past them in the Eastern Conference. Well, you might not even have to play them, first of all.
Yep.
But I would also say that Atlanta United is a totally different team now than they were in the early portions of the season. And that when you look at the standings, you think, okay, they're this good. You look at the table, you look at the point number, and you think that, okay, that's your barometer of how good this team is as it relates to their opponents. But I would say that with Atlanta United, it's different because you have a true difference maker in Luis Araujo, and that's really who I'm talking about. That makes the difference in this team. And of course, you obviously have the manager as well who makes a difference. But Luis Araujo, in my opinion, is probably one of the top. I feel like I'm underplaying this by saying like one of the top 5 most talented players in the league. If I'm like being kind of maybe more brutally honest, I think he's like the most talented player. Like, he is unbelievable. I think just getting him fit and in form, coming off of, when Atlanta United brought him in, he was essentially had an off season. So I think there's been a little bit of time that's needed for him to kind of ramp up to get into his best form where he can play week in, week out and kind of give you those 90-minute performances. But, I think that the Atlanta United is just a different team, and so I think that they could very well make a run. The one thing I think that will hold them back from doing that is their road form. Again, something we've talked about on this show is that they've just been very, they've been kind of unpredictably worse when they've gone on the road. Can they figure some of that out here over the next 6 games when they have a few opportunities to go on the road like they do tomorrow and maybe play a team that isn't as good, where they can, maybe build some confidence and figure some things out? That will, I think, be the key. Because if you go back to 2018 when this team won MLS Cup, that team went on the road at times during the season. Of course, they had some stinkers here and there, but they would also go on the road at times and play exactly how they play at home and just play other teams off of their home field. And so we have not yet seen this Atlanta United team be able to do that. But maybe they can, again, get some confidence over these next few games and be able to do more of the things they want to do when they go on the road to play. But I think that if you're looking at what might hold them back, aside from who they might play, I think that is going to be the real test for this team. But, from a talent level, I think this team has all the talent. You've got international quality at the back. You've got solid midfielders and guys like Santiago Sosa. You've got Mateus Rossetto, who's really come on this year and having the best year of his career since he's been in Atlanta. So I really think that you have the talent, and that's not really going to be the thing that holds you back. It's more of just tactically, can you get yourself together on the road and play the way you want to play when you go out there?
Hey, you talk about road form, and first off, Atlanta United 2-6-6 on the road this season, 2-6-6 away this year. Kind of ironic when we were talking about TFC. I remember I was at the TFC Atlanta match up at BMO Field in October 2018, and that was a 4-1 Toronto win. Atlanta United I think they were up for Supporters Shield if they had won that match or something.
Yep.
And just the level of pessimism I felt I was like, this team is not going to get anywhere in the playoffs.
Yeah.
Playing like this, especially with a 4-1 loss to Toronto. And then, of course, we all know the rest of the story. But, I mean, the road form is concerning for Atlanta United. It is something that, they will have to overcome, especially if, they don't get into that point where they are able to host a home playoff match. I do agree with you about. Go ahead.
Can I tell you a story really quick about that Toronto game? So, like, after, they would have won the Supporters Shield if they had won that game against Toronto back in 2018 on decision day. Yep. They didn't. They lost in spectacular fashion. And I will never forget the next day that media were able to go to the training ground. I think it was like a Tuesday or something. Yeah. Pouring rain. It was like the most dreary day, and it really fit the mood, of the fans, and I'm sure the players were feeling as despondent as well. And that was the day where finally, so Tata, who was the manager at the time, was kind of famously like training them so hard, training them every day on the field. I'd seen them being out there training, playing, doing full speed scrimmaging in that kind of weather conditions.
At least he gave them water.
Yeah. No kidding. But that day, I remember they didn't train. They just did some gym work and left. And I'm sure they watched some video and stuff, but they left it. And I remember thinking like, that's different. And then of course they go on a run from there. And so maybe the training is whatever, but I just think it was funny that the fact that you were at such a low, but you were still able to kind of reset yourself for this playoff situation. It's kind of like a new season. It's a mini season, right? Mm-hmm. And set yourself off on a course where, of course, they went on to win MLS Cup. So you never know. When the playoffs come around, anything can change.
No, exactly. It's so unpredictable. I was kind of saying I agree with you on Araujo. Just supremely talented. You can see it pretty much every time he touches the ball.
Beautiful.
And one thing I would like to see him improve on his shot selection, because I think he gets too ambitious. He gets too full of himself. I don't mean that in a negative fashion, but he starts to feel himself so much that he'll make just a long shot from distance to try to impress the fans. I don't know if he's trying to impress the fans. I don't know if he's just trying to play outside his means, but I think that's something that he needs to rein in, that ambition, just try to play to his abilities a little bit more.
I'll throw in, one idea. Something I've been thinking about with this is that maybe the reason that he does resort to that kind of thing is actually more of a lack of cohesion with the team than anything else. I'm not talking about personal cohesion. I'm talking about tactically. He might not know exactly where Ezequiel Barco is going to be making his run in the final third in that instance. So he might be thinking, well, I might as well just take a shot here. Since I got the ball kind of in and around the box, I might as well make something happen, because you only have a split second to think about these things, right? It's not like he gets a lot of time to kind of scan the field in that position and really look. The best teams, they're playing like liquid football, but that's because they know where each other are going to be. They don't have to even think about it. They just kind of know the pattern, and they know where each other are going to pop up. And maybe because he is a new addition in the middle of the season, he might not know that kind of thing yet. So maybe that's the reason he's doing that. But I agree with you. It would be nice to see him, taking higher quality shots. And it will be interesting to kind of track that over time, I think, for fans and us in media to kind of see, are the shots gradually getting closer to goal? That's essentially what you want to see when you're talking about shot quality.
Yeah. Speaking of Barco, he went on this amazing run of form coming out of the Olympic break. Past 3 matches, unfortunately, he's been held off the score sheet. What's kind of your level of concern about him, and do you think that this break can really do him good, especially with the possibility of Joseph being out for maybe more than one match?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I think the break will be good for Ezequiel Barco. I think the break is probably good for all these players, at least the ones that, especially the ones that actually stayed back and were able to train with Gonzalo Pineda. I think that these breaks always help you. Tactically, they help you recover physically. You can get all the rest and treatment that you need without having to have the physical stress of having to have played a game. And when you look at Barco, I mean, in that Montreal game, the last game they played before the international break, I mean, he hit the bar on, if he had scored on this goal where he hit the crossbar, it would be, referred to as one of the goals of the season in MLS. Yeah. I mean, he was like putting guys on their butts, dribbling around them. So I don't really have any concerns about him. In fact, I think that he will have to be one of the players who steps up and is the Miguel Almiron type of figure, um, the creator, the kind of engine of the team. I know people don't think about him that way because he plays in a more forward attacking role, but he is a guy who really is as fit as we've ever seen him and is running around the field like a freaking madman. When you see him, especially I think fans who are actually at the games and get the whole field perspective, um, understand a little bit more how much he is working when he is on the field. And I think that he needs to be that guy because that's why Atlanta United paid a lot of money for him. Obviously, his skill as well, but he needs to just be the figure that kind of helps propel this team and score and to scoring goals and eventually winning. But I don't have any issue with him at all. Well, I mean, you didn't ask about if I have an issue with him, but I just think that he continues to be in good form despite the fact that he hasn't been able to find the back of the net. And I think that he needs a little bit of help, honestly, finding the back of the net. I think that he's scored some goals here recently, which is great to see. But I think that he needs Atlanta United needs other people contributing to the goal scoring as well.
Yeah, he's played 20 matches this season, started 18, 1,695 minutes. So he's on pace to surpass his minute total from his first season here in 2018. And I think the big part is, he kind of alluded to it, he's been healthy. The only matches he's missed is because of that, for the most part, because of that Olympic break. And then outside of that, just he has been incredibly healthy, and that's been a big part of why he's been so valuable to Atlanta United this season. Do have a question from Ed Izzo. Thank you, Ed, for your question here on Facebook. Simple question: what's going on with Marcelino Moreno? He only played a half against Miami, did not play against Montreal. So what's kind of the issue with him? Why do you think he's not been involved as much as he has been in past early in the season?
Yeah, of course, he missed the Montreal game for personal reasons, so we don't know exactly what that was. I still don't know what it was, but I believe he's been training. I've not been able to get out to training this week because of all the stuff going on with the Braves and everything. But I feel like we would have heard if he was not training. So I would expect to see him back with the team when they play tomorrow.
Yeah, and he's another player who's kind of, I would say, fit into the background, but he had that strong runner form. I have the stats pulled up here, but he had a stretch where he scored three in a row against Orlando, July 30th. Montreal he scored, Columbus he scored. So 3-match streak where he had scored a goal, and since then he scored just once in this previous last 2 months of the season. So hopefully, whatever is the issue with him, I don't know if it's an issue. I don't know if it's an injury or anything like that. You mentioned it's a personal issue. Hopefully, what that is has been resolved. But hopefully, he can come back out and be the player that he showed, I would say, in July.
Well, and I think that he's a very interesting player in the context of what Atlanta United is able to achieve this season. Because, one of the really interesting things about what is going on at Atlanta United under Gonzalo Pineda is, them trying to fit all these players into a cohesive tactical system. Now, when you don't have Jose Martinez playing or any of your attackers, fits in a lot better because you can play them in more attacking roles higher up the field where they can do what they want to do, which is receive the ball and run at defenders and do that kind of thing.
Right.
But what we've seen is Gonzalo Pineda, I think rightly likes the back three. Atlanta United has had a lot of success in a back three here, going back several seasons now.
Yeah.
But when you play in a back three, and you also have like these 4 attacking players in Jose Martinez, Luis Araujo, Ezequiel Barco, and Marcelino Moreno, that only leaves you space for one other midfielder. Yeah. And is that one other midfielder going to be capable of doing enough in that central area of the field to allow you to control games and build up appropriately and pull the opponent out of position and be able to create damage? Marcelino Moreno has been the player, I think rightly, naturally, been the one that's been kind of selected as playing as in a central midfield role, kind of alongside a Santiago Sosa. But it hasn't quite worked out very well at times. It's so interesting with Marcelino Moreno because the reaction to his performances and maybe who he is as a player has been like, one game it's like, this guy is incredible, he's our best player, and the next game it's like, well, he maybe shouldn't even start, it should be Mateus Rossetto instead of him. So yeah, and I still don't have an answer for that question. I ask the same kinds of things. So but it will be very interesting to see kind of where he ends up fitting because of the player that he is. He played as a central midfielder for Lanús when Atlanta United brought him in. Of course, when he was playing in a different system with different players around him, so it's hard to really say like, well, he is a central midfielder or he's not, because he was more the Miguel Almiron kind of central midfielder, the free eight, or the whatever you would want to call that position. But I just think that he's a very, very interesting player in the context of what Atlanta United has going for them tactically as they head down this stretch run.
Yeah, it's going to be an interesting next 6 matches. Of course, Toronto FC tomorrow night, 7:30, before 3 straight matches at Mercedes-Benz Stadium. New York City FC, October 20th, Inter Miami, October 27th, and TFC again at home on October 30th. Joe Patrick, you are going to be a busy man over these next few weeks.
Yeah.
I would say go Braves, but as you know, I'm not a Braves fan.
City is sworn. He can't contractually say that. So yeah. It's okay. It's okay, Sydney.
But for your sake, because you're a friend of mine, I hope that they have all the success in the world.
Happiness.
Yes, exactly. So, yeah. Exactly. Joe, thanks a lot, man. We'll see you soon.
All right, thanks for having me on, Sydney. I really appreciate coming on.
Thanks. Joe Patrick here on Five Stripes Tonight. Really enjoyed having him on. And of course, you can find me at DirtySouthSoccer.com as well as 92.9 The Game. You can find me at SHWrites, SHWRITES, and of course for the latest LA United news, analysis, and opinion. DirtySouthSoccer.com, SB Nation's home for all things Atlanta United. My name is Sydney Hunt. Thank you so much for joining me tonight. We'll see you next time on another edition of Five Stripes Tonight. So long, everyone.